Hey guys, so as I said in my last video, I'm trying to get this channel up and going again and make more videos and kind of trying to decide where I want to go with it, what kind of theme I want to have. And so far, the theme has really just been girl versus planet. What that means to me is more of what I've already posted. I know I posted a lot of travel videos and some stuff about conventions and things that I've been to. And I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of what I do when I am not traveling. I'm actually kind of a homebody. I spend a lot of time reading. And I had a Goodreads goal this year to read 50 books, and I've exceeded that already. I've read 67. So sometimes I get people that ask me about the kind of books that I recommend. So I thought I would just give you guys an idea of what kind of books I do read, what I've read this year, and honestly, just some of my favorites from 2022 that I've read. Now, I mostly read a lot of crime thrillers, but there's some other stuff in there, some romance, some horror. So I just kind of thought I'd go through, and I started out thinking I would do like a typical top 5 from 2022, but there's been some authors I've discovered that I really like, and some series, and just some stuff that I'd like to share with you guys. So while I will go over my top 5 from this year, I'm also gonna kind of throw in some honorable mentions and some other books that I liked as well. So let's just get into it. All right, so I am going to start off with basically my top 5 books that I've read in 2022, but I have one that I kind of consider like an honorable mention. So I'm going to start with that one, work my way down to number 1, and then also kind of go into some of the other stuff that I've read this year that I really liked, that's more of like a series or an author that I found that I recommend, that I thought was good. So the honorable mention, basically number 6 of my top 5 books that I read this year. I read a lot of these on Kindle. I do have some that are physical books, so I'm just going to kind of show off either the physical book or the book on my Kindle. But number 6 is called The Plot. So this was a Kindle book. This is by Jean Hamp Corlitz. This one was one that I had heard about that was on kind of my TBR, my to be read list. And somebody from a book club that I'm in was reading it and recommended it. So I decided that I would read it because I was kind of in a little bit of a reading slump. And I tried it out, and I honestly just couldn't put it down. It's kind of like a book within a book, in that it is about this guy who learns of a plot for a book from one of his students, and then that student dies. And so he takes the plot and writes his own book. And it's kind of about what happens. And they, instead of telling you the plot of the book that he wrote right up front, they give you bits and pieces of that book and that story. And so in that way, it's kind of like a book within a book. And it's just super interesting. I thought it was a great concept, really enjoyed it, read it really fast. So that was basically my honorable mention, number 6 on my top 5 of 2022. So number 5 of my top 5 is a book called Local Woman Missing. This is also a Kindle book that I read. This is by Mary Kubica. And I know she's written a lot of other good stuff. I think I've read some of her other books. I don't remember offhand. I really did like this one, though. It's basically about a community where some women start to go missing. And I don't want to give too much away. I found this interesting because it kept me guessing. As I'm reading, I always kind of try to figure out the plot. You know, what's the twist? Everything's got a twist. And I didn't see this one coming. That's really honestly all I'm going to say. It was just super interesting. I thought the characters were well developed, which is always something that keeps me hanging in there when I'm reading a book and keeps me on the edge of my seat. So I just thought it was really good. Look forward to checking out some more of her books because I know she has done some others that are really good as well. So that was number 5. All right, so number 4 is kind of more of a horror novel than a thriller. This is one called Curse of the Reaper. It is by Brian McCauley. I've never read anything by him before. I've never heard of him before, I don't think, before this year. This book came recommended by a bookstagrammer that I follow on Instagram. Her handle is Crime by the Book, and she is awesome. She is probably one of the bookstagrammers that got me back into reading a lot again, because I love thrillers. I love detective stories, and I have since I was a kid. I started out reading a lot of Nancy Drew books when I was a kid, and so did she, which I find interesting. But I love almost all of the books she recommends. She's super nice. She's got like 80,000 followers, but still, if I send her a DM and ask her a question on Instagram, she will almost always reply. So, recommended by Crime by the Book, aka Abby. This is Curse of the Reaper, and this one was like, if you like horror movies like Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street and basically anything Wes Craven or anything like that, you will probably like this book. It takes place in the film industry, basically. It's about an actor that played a killer, like Freddy Krueger, basically, called the Reaper. And the movie series was revived, and there's talk of getting someone else to play the Reaper. And the main character of this book, who played the Reaper originally, kind of starts to experience some weird things, like kind of starts feeling like he is the Reaper and just can't quite figure out what's going on. And so it's about what happens with him. And it's just super interesting, just great for fans of horror movies. And I really liked it. So, all right, so this is book number 3, my third favorite book of the year. This one, actually, I had a physical copy of. I got it from Book of the Month, where I am a member, and they usually have really good books. I'm kind of a member with some friends of mine that I used to work with, and a lot of times we read along, we all get the same book, and we just kind of compare notes, and it's a lot of fun, kind of our own little book club. But this one is called The Damage. This one is by Caitlin Warrer, also an author I had never heard of until I read this book. But this one was kind of a surprise. This is actually one I got from Book of the Month that sounded good. I didn't get around to it right away, and it sat on my shelf. And for some reason, there wasn't anything that really stood out about it, so I didn't read it. And I think I read it because Book of the Month has like badges that you get for reading certain kinds of books. And I read this, and I was trying to get one of the badges. And so that is pretty much the primary reason I ended up going after it. And I ended up really enjoying it. It's basically about this lady. Her name is Julia, and her brother-in-law, her husband's brother, gets attacked. And it really upsets her husband because he's very protective. And the brother that got attacked is like not telling the whole story. And meanwhile, her husband is just getting very upset. So she's kind of afraid of what he's going to do. And I don't want to say too much, but it's kind of how it all plays out. And I loved it. I thought it was a really good story. It is a thriller, so it has kind of the aspect of what's going to happen, but it was also there were some good lessons in it, I thought, as well. So I really enjoyed that. This was my number 3 book of the year. All right, so down to the last 2. Book number 2, also a Kindle book, is called The Woman in the Library. And it is by Solari Gentile. I don't know if I'm pronouncing some of these right. If any author sees this and I have pronounced your name incorrectly, I am so sorry. And I apologize. And please reach out to me and leave a comment and tell me how to correctly pronounce your name. But just know that I appreciated your book. I really like this book. And I think originally this was my number 1. And then I read the one that was number 1 and it became my favorite. But this one, again, this is almost like another book within a book type of story. And I liked it. It takes place in like the Boston Library. and I need to go back to Boston and check out that library because it sounds amazing. And it's about a group of people that meet in this library, and there's just some stuff kind of going on behind the scenes. The main character is a writer, and she's also writing a book, so that's kind of where the book within a book plays in. But it makes you kind of wonder, like, what is going on here, because on top of being about what happens with this group of people that she meets in the library. Oh, and I forgot to mention, she meets them because they are in the library all together. They don't know each other, but they hear a scream all of a sudden. That's kind of how the book starts. And so it's about what plays out. They end up kind of becoming friends and trying to figure out, you know, what happened, like what was this scream all about. And meanwhile, she's also writing her own book, and she has a fan or somebody that writes to her that is reading her work, and that gets kind of interesting. So you wonder what's going on there. But I don't know. This book was interesting because it felt like kind of a one-off, and it was not necessarily different in. It was not necessarily different than a lot of the other books I read, but I haven't heard a lot about it, honestly. Like most of the books that I read, I either hear about on Instagram or from Book of the Month or from Facebook groups that I'm in, and they're all ones that have been reasonably popular. But I haven't heard a lot about this one, and I really liked it. So that's why it ended up being my number 2 for the year. All right, so we are down to number 1. This was my favorite book this year. I do have a hard copy of it that I got from Book of the Month. And I can't remember if I bought the book from Book of the Month before or after I read it. I think I read it on my Kindle, and I had heard of it, but I don't remember what prompted me to end up reading it, because I hear about a lot of books, and some of them I just never get around to reading, even though I want to. But I think I might have gotten it from Book of the Month as an add-on at some point, because I enjoyed it so much that I wanted a hard copy of it. And I would love to get the author to sign this at some point. But this book is called Lessons in Chemistry, and it is by Bonnie Garmis. And oddly enough, this is actually also, I think, Barnes & Noble's book of the year. It was just really good. It was quirky. Or actually, the main character in it is quirky. Her name is Elizabeth Zott. She is a chemist, a scientist, and she falls into the thing that all of us women have to deal with at some point, it seems like. At least, I don't know, most women have to deal with this at some point, but if you're a woman working in STEM, like science, technology, engineering, math, which I am, I've been in technology my whole career, you're more of a minority. I mean, it's getting better, but you're looked at differently. There's a lot of men that are in management, and it's just, any woman that's watching this will know what I mean. But this book touches on that a lot, and I identified with it, and the main character was just so quirky and so fun and interesting. She's very no nonsense. She ends up going from her career as like a chemist. It basically doesn't really, it's like bad things happen, it doesn't work out. So she becomes a cook and has a cooking show. But she does it her own way. She does it like this scientific way. Like she cooks, it's hard to explain, but it makes sense when you read the book. But I just found this so relatable and so interesting, and I just loved her quirkiness, and I fell in love with the character. She was awesome, and I would honestly love to read more books about her. So Bonnie Garmis, if you're watching this, I hope you will be writing more books about Elizabeth Zott, because I would love to read more about her. But again, this was my top book this year. This is called Lessons in Chemistry. So I hope you'll go check it out.